Hey everyone, Brian Zane here with another classic pay-per-view review as nominated by my Patreon backers. You know what, folks? It's a deadly game that we play as we live our lives when we say what's on our minds. So play it now before the game is over. I'm talking about Survivor Series 1998 from November 15th at the Gill Center in St. Louis, Missouri. The show was nominated by Mike Fangman over on patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. Yes, folks, for the World Wrestling Federation, business was hotter than it had ever been, and it was only going to get even bigger from here. But, you know, many people consider this to be one of the best pay-per-views of the Attitude Era, certainly one of the better Survivor Series shows in history. And from a personal standpoint, it's one of my favorite shows of all time. I've probably told similar stories to this in the past on the classic segment, but, you know, young 13-year-old Brian Zane in his first year of wrestling super fandom, going to his friend's house to watch it on his family's black box. This was one of the more seminal watershed moments in my life as a fan, to watch this show live and just take in one of the biggest storylines that were ever conceived during the Attitude Era. This show is considered one of Vince Russo's biggest shining moments as a head writer. Like I mentioned, the last show I reviewed, Mayhem 99, that was his introduction to WCW, more or less. So I wanted to kind of wash the taste of a bad Russo show out of my mouth with what's considered to be a good Russo show. But it's been a long time since I've watched the show, so how well does it all hold up? Is it just nostalgia, or is it something more? We're about to find out. At Breakdown in September, Steve Austin is in an unwinnable situation as champion, defending his belt in a triple threat against The Undertaker and Kane, in which the brothers could not pin each other to win. Double pin on Austin, the title is held up. At Judgment Day the next month, Taker versus Kane for the championship with Steve Austin as the referee. If Austin could not humble himself and call it down the middle, he would be fired. He couldn't, so he was. It was then announced that a one-night 14-man tournament would take place at Survivor Series to determine a new champion. A deadly game, you might call it. It is the first WWF title tournament since WrestleMania 4, which was won by Randy Savage. Also worth pointing out that because the nature of the show, it being tournament-based, it's the first Survivor Series pay-per-view in which there are no traditional Survivor Series elimination matches. Next time you'd see that happen was in 2002 when they debuted the Elimination Chamber matchup. But it's crazy to think that from September 27th to November 15th, there was no WWF champion. Like, it's insane to think that, you know, it went that long without someone at the top in the championship spot. But when you look at every other number they were doing in terms of ratings and, you know, house gates and, you know, ticket sales and everything like that, they were still doing so well as long as Steve Austin was still there and just showing up. It didn't really matter if there was a champion or not, it seemed. It didn't matter if he had the belt or not. So they were in a pretty good position here. And I guess now in modern times, I guess we as fans are accustomed to having a world champion that you don't really see for weeks or months at a time. So I guess it's, you know, I guess this time period kind of tested the waters for that experiment. Anyway, a couple of weeks after Austin's firing, a babyface Shane McMahon reinstates Austin, signs him to a 5-year contract. Mr. McMahon removes Shane from his position of power and demotes him to a lowly referee. The Rock is also a thorn on the side of the corporation at this point and is even removed from the tournament at one point before he earns it back at the last minute. Meanwhile, Mankind is seemingly being groomed by Vince to become the next champion, going as far back as earlier in the year when Dude Love was fighting Austin for the title. So a continuation of that angle. He's given a shave and a haircut, 2 bits, along with being given the new Hardcore Championship made just for him, a belt which would take on a life of its own in later years. 21,179 people packed the Gill Center, 478,000 pay-per-view buys, the most buys in Survivor Series history, leading to a 1.3 buy rate. Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler on commentary. Mr. McMahon opens the show. He hobbles up from his wheelchair and stands by the apron to announce Mankind, who's wearing a tuxedo, along with Mankind's mystery opponent, and speculation was rampant about who the mystery opponent was going to be. Before he says anything, we hear some HBK chants in the crowd. I was personally speculating it was going to be Macho Man Randy Savage. He was in between contracts in WCW at the time, so you know what? It was possible. It was, you know, Monday Night Wars. Anything could have happened. Vince begins listing off all the Mystery Man's accomplishments off a cue card, calling him a legend whose win-loss record set new standards in the Federation before jumping to WCW, but now he's back. The man, the myth, Duane Gill, former Federation jobber making his triumphant return. He even gets music and Titantron and a pyro, which gives him a heart attack. It's a shame the network does not have the original Duane Gill music for his entrance here, because that song fucking slapped. I love how Vince introduces him as being the coach of the Pasadena Chargers, and then as he's making his entrance, JR goes, "I've been told by one of our producers that the Pasadena Chargers are an elementary school football team. Love it." Anyway, it's not much of a match here. Mankind just throws him into the ring, stomps him a couple of times, hits the double arm DDT, and then an amateur-style roll-up to win the match. I give it a half star to 5. Like I said, it's not much of anything. It's just an easy squash match for Mankind to breeze to the first round. The fix looks to be in. Again, more seed planting for what's to come at the end of the night. But, Duane Gill, it was not the last we'd see of him, of course. As many of us know, Gill would pull a James Ellsworth before Ellsworth pulled it off, and he got over. The following week on Raw, the Job Squad helped him beat Christian to become the light heavyweight champion. Then he became Gillberg, and the rest, as they say, is history. Earlier on Heat, women's champion Jacqueline attacked Sable from behind. Kevin Kelly interviews Sable afterward, and she's all fired up.
The only thing that Jacqueline did was me off.
Your next tournament match sees Jeff Jarrett, who's accompanied by Deborah McMichael, versus Al Snow. Now, Deborah is the recent divorcee of horseman Mongo McMichael, and she has just debuted for the Federation recently to be alongside Jeff Jarrett. Al Snow has Head, who has Mr. Sacco wrapped around it. More on that later. Snow begins by stalking Deborah outside before Jarrett attacks him. Some back and forth here. Snow even goes for a top rope leg drop and misses. A lovely crucifix pin by Snow, though. We get an accidental collision and a double down. Deborah gets on the apron with Head, and Jarrett gets that while Snow gets the guitar. Double J strikes first, goes for another shot, but Snow evades, grabs the Head back, and decks Jarrett with it to win the match and advance. I gave it 1 star to 5. It's a pretty short matchup here, but they managed to get a lot of stuff just like crammed in there. A lot of big high spots into a relatively short match for Snow to pick up the win and advance the next round. In your next tournament matchup, the Big Boss Man, who is Mr. McMahon's personal security force, takes on Stone Cold Steve Austin. The match begins with a brawl on the outside. Austin is on top, but the Boss Man hits a blatant low blow that goes unpunished. It isn't just a WCW thing, folks. Vince and company look on the split screen as Boss Man works over Austin, but Austin makes a comeback, hits the stomps. Boss Man goes to the outside and beats up Austin with a nightstick and gets disqualified. Austin does advance, but now he's going into the next round a whole lot worse for wear. I give it 1 star out of 5, and here's the thing. It's not really fair of me to try and grade these tournament matches in terms of like match quality, because the quality of each individual match is kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Each of these tournament matches play a role in the grander overarching storyline of the tournament and of the night itself. There might be some pretty low ranked matches in this tournament, but I don't think it's really going to affect the grade that much, because with a show like this, you're kind of looking at the overall story, not so much the match quality. Here the story is the deck is stacked against Austin even more, gets beat up by Boss Man and his nightstick, so the McMahon and company are just kind of like more oppressing him. That's the real takeaway with this matchup. So yeah, not a high quality matchup, but the story is what's important. Sure enough, backstage, Michael Cole interviews Mr. McMahon and asks if he's concerned if Austin's advanced in the tournament, and Vince says, "The night is young for Mr. Austin, you ain't seen nothing yet." The next match of the tournament sees X-Pac, the European champion, taking on the real man's man, Steven Regal, and boy, what a shit gimmick this was. I think it's just one of those like classic bad gimmicks of the late 90s, just not befitting of someone like Regal. You might say it besmirches him a little bit, but yeah, he's got the lumberjack aesthetic with the hard hat on, squeezing his own orange juice, chopping his own wood, and that so bad it's good theme song, "He's a Man." Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like only in the Attitude Era could you see a gimmick like this. Apparently the rumor was that it was going to be revealed eventually that Regal's real man's man gimmick was gay and kayfabe, because of course it was going to be. It's actually the only pay-per-view Regal would work under this gimmick before he was fired a little bit later. More on that after this match is over. Regal slows down X-Pac considerably here, stretching him and tying him up in knots. Regal kicks out of a roll-up, he counters it and hits a slingshot to nowhere. Not very often you see one of those that's not in the corner. Nice top rope double arm suplex by Regal. X-Pac eventually fights back, hits the Bronco Buster. Regal falls into the ropes and X-Pac gets crushed off the top. They get to the outside, X-Pac suplexes Regal and starts punching him, but they're both counted out. The match is a draw, and the next couple of minutes are it's just kind of awkward, very confusing, because McMahon is pissed because this means Austin's going to get a bye in the tournament because it's a draw, so he tells Commissioner Slaughter to get out there and add a 5-minute overtime to it, but after they announce it and ring the bell, X-Pac just leaves because he's hurt, and so the match is effectively over, and the decision still stands. It's a draw, the bell rings again, and Vince is none too pleased about this turn of events. Now, as far as the match itself goes, I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. It's refreshing to see a longer, more drawn-out technical match after seeing those first 3 matches. They didn't have a whole lot of meat to them, pretty short in comparison, but it's good action despite the awkward, post double count-out finish. As far as Regal was concerned, just days after this pay-per-view, less than a week afterward, he'd be sent home for being in no condition to perform, still pretty doped up on painkillers around this time, sadly. He would be released from the company a few months later, but he'd come back in the year 2000, and he's been there ever since. Next tournament match sees Ken Shamrock taking on Goldust. Now, Ken Shamrock has some recent tournament experience. He won the King of the Ring earlier in the year, and then, of course, he won the Intercontinental Championship in a one-night tournament on Monday Night Raw. Meanwhile, Goldust is back as his usual self here. He just came off a multi-month stint as Dustin Runnels as a version of himself, feuding with Val Venus, and ultimately becoming Goldust once again at Judgment Day. If you want to learn more about that, watch my recent Goldust in WWE episode. Shamrock on the attack early on. Goldust goes for a clothesline, but Shamrock ducks, which seems to have not been what they called, because they cover up for it pretty well in the do-over. Shamrock works over Goldust for several minutes before Goldie makes the comeback. He teases Shattered Dreams, but the referee stops him. Shamrock then hits an ugly Hurricane Rana, and now he's in the zone. Suplex, ankle lock, Goldust submits, and Shamrock wins and advances. I give it 2 stars out of 5. It's a decent match with a couple of odd moments here and there. Of all the tournament matches on the night, this one probably has the least amount of storyline implications, but not much else for me to say about it. Backstage, Michael Cole has an update on Steve Austin. He says he needs medical attention, but he's refusing it. But if he knows Austin, he'll find a way to compete in the next round. We expect to see one of the bigger rivalries in '98 to be revisited here, as The Rock is set to take on Triple H in the first round of the tournament, but Triple H is still out with a knee injury. Patterson and Briscoe come out to Triple H's music, complete with crotch chops. It's pretty hilarious. They announce a replacement. It's the Big Bossman, who, as you know, was eliminated earlier in the night after getting DQ'd against Steve Austin. The match begins, the match ends. The Rock rolls up Bossman and wins in seconds. My favorite part of this is afterward, though, when Bossman and the Stooges are freaking out. Bossman stops what he's doing to post the hard cam as if he won. I give it a half star out of 5. Again, rating these matches on a star scale, kind of irrelevant when you consider it's part of the overall story for the night. It is an entertaining segment with the Stooges and the lightning quick matchup here. Of course, not the last time The Rock would be involved in a very short match on a large stage. Just ask Eric Rowan. By the way, Triple H would come back to TV a mere 2 weeks later. We move on to the next round of the tournament as The Undertaker battles his brother Kane. Now, these two got a first round bye in the tournament because, according to kayfabe, Mr. McMahon wanted to make sure these guys got to wrestle each other and just beat the hell out of each other in the process. By the way, I love this version of The Undertaker. The look, the robe, the outfit underneath, the music, it's perfect. After more than 2 years of being apart and being at each other's throats, The Undertaker and Paul Bearer have finally reunited. At Judgment Day in that championship matchup, Paul Bearer returned to TV and turned on his son Kane. The next night on Raw, Taker and Bearer revealed their dark plot, and Bearer was like, "Kane, I used you, boy!" In this promo, Taker not only plants the seeds for what will become the Ministry of Darkness at the beginning of the next year, but he also admits to starting the fire at the funeral home that killed his parents and scarred Kane. But you know, time heals all wounds and whatnot. The match begins with a big old brawl from the get-go. Kane goes for an elbow drop, but Taker sits up to avoid it. Taker works over Kane for a while until Kane does the whole Michael Myers thing and just starts no-selling the punches. Big top rope clothesline, a choke slam, and up comes Paul Bearer to the apron. The distraction's all it takes for Taker to hit the tombstone. Bearer holds Kane's foot down during the pinfall for Taker to win and move on to the semifinals. I give this one 1.5 stars. These guys fought a lot in 1998. They fought at WrestleMania, at Unforgiven, at Breakdown, at Judgment Day, a couple of Raws here and there. This show, talk about running this feud into the ground. And you know, this was one of the least inspired of all these matches. It's kind of crazy to think how far Kane had fallen from the beginning of the year to the end when it took 3 tombstones to put Kane away at WrestleMania. And here he goes down to 1 tombstone with someone lightly grabbing his ankle. It doesn't help the fact that Undertaker's actually working hurt around this time period. So yeah, not one of their better matches. This one's been beaten to death. Next quarterfinal matchup sees Mankind versus Al Snow. How fortuitous they're facing off here, considering it's Snow who allegedly stole Mr. Sacco. Snow grabs a chair early on and swings for the fences, but Mankind ducks. JR makes the obligatory reference to Mark McGuire, which he himself acknowledges is obligatory. You know, someone, again, 13 years old, growing up, not watching any legitimate sport during this time, just watching wrestling. My big exposure to baseball was JR's commentary during the summer of '98 when every time there was like a chair shot or kendo stick or guitar shot to the head, JR would always go, 61, 62, like counting the number of home runs like Mark McGuire or Sammy Sosa had during their big home run competition that season. Anyway, in the split screen, Briscoe reveals it was McMahon who stole Sacco and pinned Al Snow the whole time. Mankind finally sees that Sacco's on head and the crowd pops tremendously for that realization acceleration that Mankind has. He grabs the sock and starts beating up Head, which is amazing. Mankind hits a double arm DDT, puts on the sock, and puts on the mandible claw. Mankind wins and advances. I give it 2 stars out of 5. Not very often you see a match like this where you see Mankind fighting Al Snow, because they were usually booked as friends until Mankind's heel turn later in '99. But it's always good to see these guys working each other. And the story they told here with Mankind discovering the sock was a nice little touch. Next quarterfinal match sees The Rock versus Ken Shamrock, another pairing with a lot of history in 1998. These guys fought at the Royal Rumble, at WrestleMania, in the King of the Ring finals, at Breakdown as part of the Triple Threat cage match with Mankind. And one moment in the feud that really deserves its own entry is the brutal chair shot to the face The Rock gave Ken Shamrock, just right into the mush. Anyway, they're fighting on the outside. Shamrock gets the advantage and begins to dominate The Rock. Bossman shows up again. Who does he think he is? Creative Control? Shamrock hits a Hurricane Rana, a much better one than the last time, into the ankle lock, but The Rock grabs the ropes. Big ass double down off the clotheslines. Rock is back up, hits the float over DDT. He tricks the Bossman into going on the apron, which allows for a low blow unseen by the referee. People's elbow and a kick out, which is pretty rare at this time. Bossman back on the apron. Looks like he's throwing the nightstick to Ken Shamrock, but The Rock intercepts it, clocks Shamrock in the face with it, and wins the match. What a flawless one-handed catch by The Rock there. He could have easily dropped it, looked like a dumbass, but there you go. It actually looks really good. I give this one 2.5 stars out of 5. As part of like looking at their grander series, I don't think it's their best match in their collection, but it is one of the stronger matches of the night in terms of quality. We go backstage for a Paul Bearer interview, and he says the only kind of rock the Undertaker likes is a piece of granite for a gravestone, and says that Taker will become the next champion. Taking a break from the tournament for the time being as Jacqueline defends the Women's Championship against Sable. Now, 2 months ago, they revived the women's title for the first time in 3 years since Alundra Blaze held the belt. Jackie beat Sable for it on Raw under some suspicious circumstances, and here's the rematch. And most recently, as part of the build, Jackie actually cut off a lock of Sable's hair and put it in her own hair as a weave. Shane McMahon, by the way, is the lowly referee for this matchup. Jackie with the jump on Sable, but we get a hip toss and a big kick to the mush. Sable hits the TKO and looks to have it won, but Mara pulls Sable out of the ring. Dick kick City and a Sable bomb on the floor. Poor Mark. Jacqueline regains the advantage. Good to see Maro's reapplied his bandana. You know, priorities. She goes for a tornado DDT, but Sable blocks it. The Sable bomb, the pin, and the win. New women's champion. I give this one 2 stars out of 5. A relatively short matchup, but I think they both look good, so kudos to Jackie for carrying Sable to a really passable match. Sable would go on to hold the belt for a pretty long time until May of the next year, when she would lose it in an evening gown match to Deborah, but it was one of those weird opposite day rules where actually Deborah, she was the one who was stripped of her dress, but she still won because Commissioner Shawn Michaels made it so. Go figure. Back to the tournament we go as Mankind takes on Steve Austin, who is banged up, but he starts out strong. He begins to strip Mankind of his tux jacket and slippers. Here comes the corporation. Austin goes for a stunner, but Mankind gets out of it and sprints back up the ramp. I've never seen him move that fast before. The Stooges bring him back toward the ring. Austin noggin knocks Patterson and Briscoe. He takes a backdrop on the floor though. Both men are down after a double clothesline, and McMahon is shouting at Foley to get back up. Mankind brings a chair into the ring, but he eats it. Austin goes for an attack, but he misses. Double arm DDT on the chair. Austin somehow kicks out. Backdrop to Mankind on the chair. The stunner. McMahon jumps out of his wheelchair and pulls out the referee. He's healed, everyone. Mike Chioda is just knocked out. Mankind's fallen out of his tuxedo pants. Austin with a low blow. Another stunner. In comes Shane McMahon to make the count and save the day. 1, 2, he stops, he flips Austin off. Oh, the deception by young Shane McMahon. He is his father's son after all. And here's where things begin to fall off the rails, because the finish apparently was that Big Boss Man was supposed to be out there, attack Stone Cold, and that would allow Mankind to win. But due to a backstage miscommunication, because Bossman is going to be involved in the next tournament matchup, he was backstage going over his part in the match, and so he's not out there. So when the moment comes when Shane turns on Stone Cold, Bossman's supposed to attack. Where the hell's Bossman? No one knows what to do. So they call an audible, and basically Slaughter and Briscoe get in the ring. Briscoe hits a terrible chair shot onto Austin because he's trying to protect his neck. And so then afterward, Mankind pins him, and the match is over. Yeah, that was a bit of a clusterfuck finish. And like, I just listened to Bruce Pritchard's podcast, him talking about the show before I watched this event. So that knowing that knowledge now and going back and watching that and just seeing, you could just feel the tension when, where the hell's Bossman? Where is he? What's going on? What do we do now? You can just feel the cringe and the anxiety and the tension in that ringside area when the finish is going to get botched and everything. But they are able to save the day. Mankind wins, and so he advances to the next round. I give it 3.5 stars. Easily the best and most pivotal match of the night, despite the awkward, kind of audible finish there. The McMahons and the rest of the corporation escape in a limo, and Austin's hot in pursuit in a truck he stole. We then go to our last semifinal match, The Undertaker versus The Rock. The winner faces Mankind in the main event. Good back and forth in this matchup. At one point, The Rock's tied up in the ropes. He gets out of it though and backdrops Taker to the outside. Samoan drop by The Rock, and then there's a double down. Here comes the Bossman. Better late than never, I guess. Rock hits a DDT, then mocks Taker's sit-up. Goes to the people's elbow when the Bossman trips him up. Taker goes for a chokeslam, but then out comes Kane. In a bit of a twist, he chokeslams The Rock. Is he back together with his brother? No, he's just fucking with him, because by doing so, he disqualifies The Undertaker. The Rock moves on to the finals, and Taker is in disbelief. He and Kane begin fighting once again, going through the crowd, and The Rock makes his way back up to his feet, and that's where that ends. I think there's better chemistry between Taker and The Rock than, say, Taker and Kane earlier in the night. Despite Undertaker working hurt, I think this is a more entertaining matchup with a pretty clever finish. Backstage, Mankind says he's got one more hill to climb if you smell what the Sokka's cooking, and Cole's like, get a load of this guy, am I right? In your semi-main event, the New Age Outlaws defend their tag team championships against the Headbangers and D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry. Someone's a big Thrasher fan, because not only does someone have a custom New Jersey license plate with his name on it, but a custom airbrushed shirt with his face on it. One should be so lucky. Now, the whole thing with this, it's 3 men in the ring at one time. It's a triple threat match, but each man's got their own partner on the outside, and apparently you could also have 2 members from the same team in the ring at the same time, apparently, but you can't have partners pin partners. The Outlaw rules in effect. Everybody got that? The whole match feels like a cluster here. There's no psychology. Pinfalls keep getting broken up all the time. In a regular triple threat, you have chances for the third man to take a powder out and have the other guys like do kind of singles work for a bit until the third man breaks it up. Here you don't get that luxury because everyone's got their partners on the apron, so it's like there's no breaks. Everyone's going to be working all the time. Beautiful Hurricane Rana from the top rope by D'Lo though. Lots of awkward fighting and some weird communication going on. Big old dick kick city from Mosh to D'Lo. Jarrett with a great line. Are they going to make a tag or does it matter? Big hot tag by Billy, and from here on out, referee Tim White's in a constant state of buffering because every time someone makes a pinfall, it takes forever to get down and make the count. Gunn finally hits Mosh with a pile driver to end this dumpster fire of a match, and the Outlaws retain. I give this one a half star out of 5, and it's not like me saying, oh, well, this other match that's really short is a half star, but it's part of the overall story, so it gets a pass. No, this is a shitty match. It's bad from the start, and it does not get any better as it goes on. In your main event, a brand new WWF Championship will be decided in the finals of the tournament as Mankind takes on The Rock. The story here is that Mankind, seemingly the one who's been given all these breaks in the tournament, groomed to be the corporate champion, while The Rock has been scratching and clawing his way through the entire time. The McMahons are back in the arena now. They tell the big boss man to go home for the night. They want to take care of business themselves. And JR on commentary says, I was hoping not to see Montreal revisited. Way to hit you over the head with it, guys. The match is going on. Both guys are physically and mentally spent, so they're just kind of trying to roll with it. Guess who shows up? It's Vince and Shane. Nice tumble to the outside by Foley after a punch by The Rock. Suplex on the floor. They fight in the crowd. The Rock goes for a trash can, just flies out of his hands. Mankind goes tumbling back into ringside and in the ring. Mankind clatters The Rock with a chair, goes to some steel stairs, but The Rock hits back with a chair, just pummels him with it. Pow right in the kisser, and JR goes, his brain cells are depleted. Mick with the cactus elbow off the apron onto The Rock, drops the leg on The Rock while they're on the announce table. The Rock still kicks out in the ring. Mankind dives off the second turnbuckle to the outside toward The Rock, but The Rock moves. Mick crashes down and breaks the table in half. Rock hits the people's elbow, but Foley kicks out. Mankind grabs Socko. The mandible claws locked in. Lawler says they're going to have to make another little title belt for Mr. Socko. The Rock powers out of it, hits the Rock bottom. We get a kick out. The Rock then raises an eyebrow at Vince, puts Mankind on the sharpshooter, and McMahon tells the timekeeper to ring the fucking bell. The Rock is awarded the match and is the new World Wrestling Federation champion. And actually, he's the first man to hold that particular version of the Big Eagle belt. You know, it's the 1-year anniversary of the Montreal screw job, so how are we going to celebrate this milestone? Let's do the exact same finish we did last year, only this time it's going to be worksies. We're not going to shoot into it like we did with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. And so, yeah, you know, it's a nice little wink and nod to it, but it's not very clever, not very original way to do that. You could have had a lot of different ways to have a screw job finish without just doing a carbon copy of what you did last year that garnered so much attention the year before. Also, had that finish not happened, The Rock probably would have never used the sharpshooter as a move, which I think we would have all been better Raw 4 because Rock's sharpshooter looks like shit. After the match, Vince gets on the mic and says, the people screwed the people, and says, you're all as gullible as mankind. Vince gets some words in, then Shane, then The Rock. Mankind's still dreadfully confused at what's going on. The Rock decks Mankind from behind with the title, another rock bottom. Vince can't snap the belt around The Rock's waist, so he just tells him to hold it over his shoulder. The heels raise their hands in victory. Suddenly, Steve Austin appears and rushes the ring. They has fight. Austin hits the stunner and throws The Rock out of the ring. Hits Mankind with a stunner for good measure as we fade to black. I think the Austin involvement at the end of the show was kind of a weak way to end the show. I get having the fans leave home happy, but I think you should have saved that for after the show went off the air. For ultimate intrigue and kind of cliffhanger, kind of like quite what the fuck's going on, have the show end with The Rock and McMahon and with Vince and Shane celebrating the ring, fade to black, and then once you're off the air, have Austin show up and have the fans go gaga at the end for the hero beating him. But I think that really took a lot of oomph out of the moment of The Rock turning heel and just like totally swerving everybody. It's something that no one really saw coming. Is complete bamboozlement on behalf of World Wrestling Federation. So to have that moment there and just have it neutralized so quickly by Austin, that was kind of a bad move in my opinion. As far as the match itself, I give it 4.5 out of 5. I am going to ding it a little bit for the recreation of the Montreal Screwjob, but besides that, it was easily the best match of the night. Had the most time to tell a big story, lots of great action, and of course, the big swerve at the end. Again, you could have done it a different way, but as it is, just the fact you had that swerve where McMahon cost Mankind the match and the championship, and everyone was fooled about The Rock being the corporate champion all along. Great stuff. I loved it. The next night on Raw, Austin did get a title shot against The Rock, but it ended in a DQ when Taker clocked Austin with a shovel. This would lead to their Buried Alive match at Rock Bottom, but that's a story for another time. My final grade for Survivor Series 1998 is a B+. Now, here's the thing. There are a lot of matches on this show, and almost none of which you could consider amazing or even very good. So that'll knock the grade down, but only by a little bit, because if you look at the bigger picture and see the story they're trying to tell in a single night with these shorter, not so great matches, it's just so damn brilliant. From top to bottom, the seeds are planted for weeks and weeks, and it's one of those twists at the end where you go, how could I not have seen this coming? But then you look back at the seeds they were planting on Raw and Heat in the weeks leading up to it, and then it makes all the sense in the world. But it was just one of those really subtle things. 13-year-old me was blown away by it. 34-year-old me still blown away by it. It's just one of those things. It crushed my heart so much when The Rock first won, and then the jubilation that he won it, and then, oh my God, he was actually in cahoots with the McMahons the whole time. How dare you, Rock? I was one of the people. It was just such a great standalone show that just tells this great story. It still holds up today, I think. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, Survivor Series 98 is one of Vince Russo's greatest achievements as a head writer. He will tell you that. Even his biggest detractors will tell you that. It's just a story that still holds up today. And yeah, what can I say? Overall, as a standalone, as a story being told in a single night, an amazing pay-per-view. Well, I hope you enjoyed my review of Survivor Series 1998. If you want to play a role in determining which shows I look at, be they good, bad, or somewhere in between, go to patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret, become a $10 backer or above, and you'll have the chance to nominate classic shows for me to review. Next time, I want to finally get out of the late 90s, Attitude Era, Monday Night Wars period. I've been doing a few of those in a row lately, and I feel kind of bad because I know I've been getting lots of pay-per-views spanning multiple decades, and I want to try and get into a bit of a different era. So I know a few people have been asking me to review some Ruthless Aggression era pay-per-views. So next time I'm going to look at Survivor Series 2003. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.